$315 billion. That's one staggering cost estimate for Donald Trump's signature campaign promise, the largest domestic deportation operation in American history. More conservative estimates are still enormous, with one group putting it at $162 billion, more than the government spends on most federal agencies in fiscal year 2024. An operation of this scale could require hundreds of billions of dollars over a decade. When asked if it's his plan to deport everyone in the country illegally over the next 4 years, Trump responded, "Well, I think you have to do it, and it's a very tough thing to do." This means roughly 13 million immigrants who entered the U.S. illegally are at risk of deportation, about 4% of the U.S. population. To put that into perspective, the entire U.S. prison and jail population in 2022 was around 1.9 million people. Aaron Reichlin-Melnick, a senior fellow at the American Immigration Council, a liberal immigration group, notes that Trump would have to more than quadruple current ICE removals of people arrested in the interior just to hit the levels seen previously under Obama. Trump suggests starting with what's achievable, such as deporting 1 million people annually, which could still cost about $88 billion per year and take 11 years, assuming 20% of people leave on their own. Ron Vitiello, who led ICE during Trump's first term, acknowledges the government is currently underfunded for detaining people and would require a reallocation or infusion of resources to accomplish this alongside the border mission. Other experts, like Stephen Camarota of the Center for Immigration Studies, argue that a more robust enforcement approach could create significant economies of scale, potentially lowering costs over time. Deportation begins with arrests, which would be targeted based on investigative processes. Trump has indicated that Dreamers might be an exception, but ICE officers would need to identify individuals already in custody or conduct at-large arrests, a more logistically complicated and expensive tactic. At-large arrests often require multiple federal agents and days of surveillance, as ICE officers generally lack warrants for immigration violations, which are not criminal offenses. The American Immigration Council estimates ICE would need to hire over 30,000 new law enforcement agents and staff to carry out arrests at this scale, making it the largest federal law enforcement agency. Vitiello disputes this, suggesting state and local law enforcement could assist via task forces. Detention is the most expensive part of the process, costing around $200 per day per person. Congress has funded 41,500 detention beds for fiscal year 2025, far short of the 1 million needed annually. The American Immigration Council estimates ICE would need to construct 216 soft-sided facilities yearly for 11 years. Those not detained would be placed on electronic surveillance, costing about $4 per person daily. Private contractors involved in detention and transportation could further drive up costs. Detaining children, which requires additional resources like child welfare professionals and pediatricians, would also increase expenses. Vitiello suggests repurposing existing facilities like Guantanamo Bay or partnering with third countries to reduce costs. Camarota notes that over 1 million immigrants with final removal orders could be detained at lower costs, as they could be deported quickly. Legal processing is another bottleneck, with an additional 10.6 million cases requiring nearly 2,000 more immigration judges and over 1,100 courtrooms. Each case costs over $2,500, including support staff and prosecutors. Tent courts, like those built in 2019 for the migrant protection protocols, could expedite hearings but come with significant costs. $16 million to build and $143 million annually to operate. Once a removal order is issued, the U.S. government must arrange deportation, which could involve over 6,000 removal flights annually, compared to ICE's 1,200 in fiscal year 2023. The average ICE removal flight costs about $17,000 per hour, a figure that could rise if private contractors increase prices. Trump has stated there is no price tag for his plan, and Camerota believes the cost will be spread over several years, as deporting 1 million people annually, let alone 13 million, is impractical. Funding from Congress will be crucial, with Senate Republicans prioritizing border security and increased ICE resources. However, with a narrow majority, securing such funding is no guarantee. As one Republican senator warned, resisting rational deportation policy could be politically perilous for Democrats. The scale and complexity of Trump's mass deportation plan highlight the immense logistical, financial, and humanitarian challenges it would entail. Beyond the sheer cost, the operation would require unprecedented coordination across federal, state, and local agencies, as well as private contractors. The plan's reliance on at-large arrests, detention, legal processing, and removal flights underscores the enormity of the task. For instance, detaining 1 million people annually would necessitate not only constructing hundreds of temporary facilities, but also ensuring compliance with legal standards, particularly for families and children. The need for additional immigration judges, courtrooms, and support staff further complicates the process, as the current system is already overwhelmed with backlog cases. Moreover, the human impact of such a plan cannot be overlooked. Deporting millions of people would inevitably separate families, disrupt communities, and strain social and economic systems. While Trump has suggested exceptions for dreamers and emphasized starting with criminals, the broader implications of targeting such a large portion of the undocumented population remain contentious. Critics argue that many undocumented immigrants contribute to the economy and have deep roots in their communities, making mass deportation not only costly but also socially disruptive. The plan's reliance on state and local law enforcement cooperation also raises questions about feasibility and public support. While task forces could assist with at-large arrests, not all jurisdictions may be willing to participate, particularly in areas with strong immigrant communities. Additionally, the use of tent courts and expedited hearings, while potentially reducing costs, could raise concerns about due process and the fairness of legal proceedings. Funding remains a critical hurdle. Even with Republican control of Congress, securing the necessary resources for such a massive operation is uncertain, especially given competing budget priorities and potential opposition from Democrats. The estimated costs, ranging from $162 billion to $315 billion, would require significant reallocations or increases in federal spending, which could face resistance from fiscal conservatives. Ultimately, Trump's mass deportation plan represents a bold and controversial approach to immigration enforcement. While proponents argue it would restore the rule of law and deter illegal immigration, critics warn of its exorbitant costs, logistical challenges, and humanitarian consequences. As the debate continues, the feasibility and implications of such a plan will likely remain at the forefront of national discussions on immigration policy. Whether the public and policymakers view the trade-offs as well worth it, as some supporters claim, will depend on broader assessments of its economic, social, and moral impacts.